Today's main question is really about what the homeschool day should look like. Getting a lot of that. People just after it gets started, what should the day look like? Should it mimic, a public school day experience? How structured does it need to be? And what all should it entail? And before we kind of address that directly, I kind of want to back into it and get to it at the end because I think there's a bigger question here of like what should be included in the day and where should the focus be as far as curriculums and subjects because we're in kind of an interesting time and era where I think it was Gary Vee who pointed out that information is a commodity now. And so
Yeah.
that's like one of the big things with teaching and learning that I know frustrated me as a kid and even how many times growing up. It's like, when am I going to actually use this? When am I ever going to use this level of math? When is this piece of history? Like, why does it even matter? And so there's two sides to the coin because, yes, information is a commodity. I can Google any piece of information. And so why are we cramming our kids' heads full of information when it doesn't necessarily translate to skills they need to use? But on the other side of the coin, you have an issue where IQs are dropping and we are becoming dumber as a society because we all have our calculators on our phones and nobody does mental math anymore. And you've got all this information right at our fingertips. We don't need to remember it, so we don't. And our brains are just empty spaces where we just scroll and take in whatever's in front of us, and that's that. So from a homeschooler's perspective, how do you reconcile those two? And then we'll get to like how the day should be modeled of like how much needs to go into those core studies of like math, science, reading, English that maybe don't matter or don't teach skills per se in order to make sure that uh, we're taking what we need to of the actual mental exercises so that our kids don't have low IQs.
Okay. There's a lot there, and my brain was swirling with a whole bunch of things as soon as you got talking. Um, I think there's a TED Talk video linked on the site somewhere. Sir Ken Robinson talks about. He's an education reformer from Britain, and he talks a lot about how in today's world we educate the children from the head down instead of the whole body. We don't approach education in the school systems anymore as a whole child approach. And um, someone, I couldn't tell you who in the education system, has decided which subjects are of the greatest value and which ones are going to be the most useful for jobs and careers. And so it can be really confusing and overwhelming to figure out what to focus on. And I know even at the beginning of my homeschool journey, I was very overwhelmed with feeling the need to do those core subjects the most, to copy the school the most, because I really just didn't know another way. And now that I've been doing it for 20 years, about 5 more to go, I am probably on the other end of the spectrum where um, I definitely feel that spending less time with those and more approach schooling with the whole child in mind, developing their emotions, their intellectual, their um, mental capacity to handle the challenges of life, the real issues that they're going to deal with moving into adulthood and being a contributing member of society. Um, so I guess how do we get there, right? Because I will say, if you're new to homeschooling and you haven't experienced the journey yet, it's really hard. You have to take a pretty big leap of faith and trust those who've gone before, who've embraced a different way of doing it. I mean, one of the reasons that we've most people choose to homeschool is because they're not liking what they see or are experiencing in school. And so it's interesting because we want a different experience, but because those of us who haven't had it ourselves already and went through the public school system, we're not sure how to bring that to our children. And so it's a little bit of experimenting that we're doing on our kids. Um, but to kind of tell you, I won't tell you my whole journey of where I was and where I am now, but where I am now, I feel like is more applicable to giving advice to new homeschoolers, which is that um, I would definitely sit down and decide, first of all, why you chose to homeschool. Some parents just do it for academic purposes, and probably if that's going to be your approach, then that's probably not. I don't know if what I have to say would help you, although I would hope you would embrace the way I've chosen to do it. But I think that you need to come up with your why, and then you are going to want to sit down and maybe review what it is, what things are really important to you that you want to pass on to your children. So for example, I'm in a stage of life now where I've got the last two of my seven at home that I'm homeschooling, and they are 15 and 13. And the 15-year-old wants to be a mechanical engineer, and he definitely has the brains and the passion for it. And so as his mother and facilitator, not one that necessarily needs to provide all of the lessons or classes, we're looking at what he needs to do to get an associate's degree before he turns 18 so that he can be a step ahead when he goes to engineering school. And so sciences are high on our priority list right now. Maths are high on our priority list right now. But I still want to have an aspect of the things that I want to pass along and I want to teach him. And so something that's been really important to me over the past couple of years is kind of beginning to homestead on our land. It's about a half an acre of land, and I've really enjoyed gardening the past couple of years, and our garden's been getting bigger. So that's something that's of value to me that I think will be of value to my children, and that would be part of what we will be putting into our day, because I feel like that's a real skill he'd use throughout his life. I want him to connect with nature and with the earth, and to know that there are other options of how to provide for yourself. And so those are just some highlights of what we're doing in our school right now. And feel free to interject whenever you want to. But as far as approaching what your day needs to look like, that's going to look a little different depending on your season of life. Whether you have a newborn, whether you have all children under 5, whether you have all elementary, whether you have the gamut of newborn all the way to teenager, which I've been in all of those phases before. And coming out of it, I'll say I made it harder on myself than it needed to be most of the time. I have come to embrace that there are 3 major principles that I would follow when setting up a homeschool that I think could work for any stage of homeschooling that you're in. And the amount of time you're going to spend on those principles and what they're going to look like is going to be a little more individual based on your season and based on even your personality and your interest levels. But it's called CTR school, CTR learning, whatever you want to call it. Mm. And that's an acronym for Christ-like attributes. If you are not a Christian, you could embrace character training. Christ-like attributes, tools for success, and relationships of trust. And so you're going to want, I remember when I started homeschooling, I had a very strict schedule because I happened to read a book that told me I needed to schedule every half hour to the T. And I had my children all doing different activities and keeping them engaged while I was working with another one. And for some families that can work. It was a very stressful situation for me. Um, I think that something that makes homeschooling a more enjoyable experience and a more doable experience, especially for a larger family, is to have blocks of your day. So really just think of it as morning, afternoon, evening. And if you can make sure you're fitting those things in throughout those blocks, so maybe your morning you want to spend focusing on character training or Christ-like attributes. Maybe that would be a devotional or a scripture study. Um, maybe a child is struggling to be kind or needs some books read to them about honesty. That would be a time when you could make sure that those topics are kind of covered or discussed, and they don't always have to be done in a formal way. They can be done in a way what we call incidental teaching, which is if you're at least cognizant and aware of these are the things I want to be focusing on and want to teach my child, or this is a problem I've identified, I can either set it up so that I have formal instruction on that during the day, or I can teach it as it comes up. But sometimes we aren't thinking about it, and so we forget to teach it when it comes up or address it when it comes up, because maybe we're thinking, oh, but I've got to do the math lesson and the language arts lesson. So you want to have a little bit of a more organic experience, I think, with teaching your children. And then maybe your part of your morning consists of, you go into the tools for success. Tools for success would be anything your child needs to succeed. If you decide handwriting is important for your child, then you can spend 5 minutes a day on teaching them handwriting until they've got that down. If you think a tool for success for a teenager is learning how to change oil on their car, you can spend a week, part of your morning learning how to change oil on a car, watch a video, go out and change the oil on the car. This can all be part of school. So tools for success can be anything from skill work that's academic, like learning your math facts. Again, learning how to handwrite or print, learning how to cut with scissors, to life skills, cooking, ironing, cleaning properly. Just depends the phase of life you're in and what that child needs to learn. But the point is, you're teaching them not tools just for the sake of teaching them, because like you said, there is so much information out there, but tools that are actually useful and help them succeed in an area where they would need to succeed in for real life, or where they feel a desire to succeed in for real life. Again, going back to my 15-year-old son, he's been on a mountain biking team for the past 3 years and has spent probably 2 years of it just reading book after book about bikes, bike maintenance, how to repair bikes. He's starting to do repairs for friends now. Friends are paying him to do repairs. So that's a skill that he's just taken on himself because he's passionate about it. And that's part of what he does for his learning time. And then, sometimes you're going to have things that overlap. So if you go into your afternoon, maybe you're going to still want to spend some time on tools for success. And that can be done in a plethora of ways. It doesn't need to be all formal learning. It can be, can I use a game? Anytime you can use a game to teach a skill like math facts, use a game. Don't use a workbook or something monotonous and that the child hates. Try to use a game or a challenge if they're a teenager, perhaps. And And then the other part of the day is basically with this CTR, the Christ-like attributes, the tools for success, and then your relationships of trust. I like to think of taking that R and drawing a big circle around the CTR, because your relationships encompass all of it. So hopefully while you're teaching the Christ-like attributes, you're spending the time teaching the skills, and then your relationships of trust come through. What are you discussing with your child? What's on your mind? What's on their mind? Books you're reading together, cooking together, playing together. All of these things are what make your homeschool day successful, and even your entire homeschool journey successful, I think. So that was a little long, but that would be an outline, a guideline I would give. And then your specifics can be, again, catered toward your stage of life and what's important to you, what you value.
Right. Cool. So let me see if I can summarize all of that, because there is a lot there. But basically, we've got kind of, on the one hand, information that we feel as we're first taking on homeschooling, like, okay, especially general subjects, but also just certain aspects of public school. My day has to sort of model the public school day, or at least include these things. What you're saying is that we should be focused more on skills than information, and that the skills that we're teaching, obviously there's going to be information sprinkled throughout. Would you say that there's any value in teaching or doing things just for the sake of the information or of the brain exercise, like, I don't know, times tables? Like, is obviously there's a skill transfer there, but like, just, are there activities or exercises that you would do just for the sake of the child learning how to memorize and store information? Is that still a mental
Yeah,
exercise worth engaging in, or should it all just be, if it's not applicable, it's not something they're going to use, don't worry about it?
that's a good question, and I don't know if I thought thought it through all the way. I can go off some of my readings and experience. Charlotte Mason, who was a British educator, um, thought that it was important for things to matter to the child, but she was also very much into memorization and narrative work. I do think there is value in exercising certain parts of the brain and learning pieces of information. Sometimes children don't value information the same way we do as adults. And so, for example, with the math facts, you can do that on a calculator, right? I think that something I've seen with my own children is, I do have a couple that didn't learn the math facts like the way I did in school, where you memorized them to recollect them very quickly. And they've been a little frustrated with math taking a little longer. So that skill you can hopefully show helps them be more proficient when they want to get into the harder math. And so there is a purpose behind it. You can grab your calculator, but there's a degree of not just memorizing things for the sake of memorizing it, maybe memorizing something beautiful or meaningful, or I know that, for example, not that they do this as much anymore, but on the ACT, I've learned that logic games are supposed to be the biggest help in helping people ace the ACT in the math area.
Yeah.
And not where you're doing actual math, but you're exercising the brain in a way that doesn't normally get exercised. And so,
Yeah. So, I mean, either finding the relevance and the applicability for the child and for you, so that you can kind of reframe that in your mind to maybe not just being just information for the sake of information, but also maybe some of the mental exercises and some of those things that are viewed more as increasing your or exercising your brain and stuff can be done, like you said, through games. But when it comes to what needs to be included in the day, it's not so much about X amount of English, so many hours of math, make sure they're doing this. It's more of a like you said, finding your why, not just your why, but also your child's why. What do they want? What are they interested in? Um, you might have to guide them a little bit, I would imagine, because obviously, if you have a kid that only wants to be a zoologist and be interested in animals, you're going to have to find ways to stretch his mind and make sure that he doesn't become completely inept mathematically or otherwise. So there's a balance there. It's probably a conversation that has to happen together. That establishing of why. You need to know where your why is for homeschooling, but you also need to know, and they need to know what they want to get out of it. And then working from there to structure the day around these blocks of time. Where do you focus on? Character training, the tools for success, the relationships of trust. The tools for success being probably more of the academic side, but again, very tailored to the child. With the caveat that, like, I think one of the other mental blocks you have as a new homeschooler is my kid's gone at school for 6 to 8 hours, and so I got to put 6 to 8 hours of work in front of my kid, and
Mhm.
realizing that, like, you're looking at this thinking, okay, we've got character training and then tools for success and then the relationship sprinkled throughout. Oh, I need to put almost all the time into tools for success because school takes 6 to 8 hours. But
Right.
the school experience that your child's having when they go to school is a super inefficient. It's not individualized. It's not focused. They're not focused. Half the time they're distracted. Like, it can be accomplished in a fraction of the time,
Yes.
particularly if the child is interested in what they're learning, has that perspective. Again, like, I might be doing the same thing at home as I was doing at school, but at school I just don't understand how the timetables matter. And now at home I'm like, okay, if I get these down, I can get into that math book that's going to help me get to my engineering goal that I want to hit. So having that vision for them. And then I just think people almost need permission to go away from
Yes.
some of those stigmas. Like, it doesn't have to be 6 to 8 hours. It doesn't have to be math, English, social studies, science. It doesn't have to be exactly a certain way. And if you happen to leave something out, you did not just ruin your child, because there's no piece of information, no single piece of information, in my opinion,
Yeah.
so important that, like, if you forgot to teach it or your child didn't learn it, that they're going to fail in life. Because,
Right.
again, the information is a commodity. It serves a purpose, some of those things, in expanding our minds and helping us learn. But uh, I said the other day, talking to Alyssa, like, the whole purpose of school is to eventually get our children to be able to thrive outside the home and contribute to society. So if that's the purpose, right? Thrive outside the home, contribute to society. Your child's ability to do that has way more to do with the skills that they've learned than the information that they've been able to store in their brain and recite. It helps. Certain information will certainly help. But at the end of the day, it's those skills that they've learned, the things they
Yeah.
do, the ability to change the oil on their own, to go help make money, to be able to make money fixing friends' bikes, or even just the skills that come with doing that, right? That's a whole skill set. learning how to transact, how to
Yeah,
promote yourself as being able to do that. There are all these little skills you're not even thinking about that go into that whole interaction. And
that
so
is correct.
I just, your homeschool day, in summary, is going to look very different from mine. And mine will look very different from Kennedy's. And it's just going to be based on the needs of the child. And for those of you that are listening that need permission to make this look the way it needs to look, you have permission. And you're not ruining your child by not meeting the status quo that you have in your mind,
Yeah.
because it's not even really what's best for your child anyway. What's best for your child is that they're excited about what they're learning and that you're equipping them with the skills that they need to succeed. And if you need any further verification of that, just cast your mind back to the one skill that you have that you learned in school that you just wouldn't be able to live without. As I
Mm.
answered, you can't think of. So, anything you would add to that? I know it got a little over, but
No,
yeah,
that's
summary.
exactly right. Um, yeah, I think the only other thing I would say is, like you said, that those pieces of information can be found. And I was hoping to look up a quote by Charlotte Mason, but she says something along the lines of, in the end, it's not what your child knows, it's how much do they love what they know, right? So that passion of, if you teach your, it's the old adage of teach a man how to fish and he'll fish the rest of his life, right? Teach them how to learn, and then one day when they're wanting to learn, oh, I don't know how to do this, they won't think, oh, I can't do this because I never learned it in school or I never learned it at the university. They'll think, oh, I can look this up and I can learn it and I can read the manual and I can watch the video because I can learn anything,
Oh,
and they'll figure it out. And they'll actually be, the less you mimic the school, the more unique your child will be. And that stands out to professors and employers. And so you're actually doing them a favor because it's a dime a dozen coming out of the schools today. But when my children went to the universities or were employed, every time it has been because they stood out and were unique and different from their public school peers, and the teachers and employers noticed it, and it's made a huge difference.
yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully that helps. I know a lot of these questions stem from like, tell me exactly what to do. Like, just tell me what to do. What should my day look like? Tell me that I need to wake up at this time and have a devotional and then spend 30 minutes on the times table. And then I wish I could tell you that, hey, this is the formula. Go plug this in and your kid's going to be the next Albert Einstein. But you know your kid and what they need. So again, we'll just give you the permission.
Yeah, and we need Einsteins, but we need Mother Teresa's too, right? And Jesus's. We need it all. And so the variety helps. And there's too much the same, and people are doing too much of the same and not spreading out and making the differences anymore. So of course we want Einsteins, but we need all the different.
Yeah. So if your day doesn't look the way you think it should look or thought it would look, probably on the right
Yeah, that's true. And
track.
if your kids are happy and you're having a good time and you're making good memories, and they're enjoying being curious and learning, you're doing it right.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for your thoughts. I have never ceased. I never cease to be amazed by the reservoir of knowledge that I get to sit in front of. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. Good luck, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.